where do we start with the principals? How can it help principals target the benefits that they want to get from technology? So the principals
first I want to say it's taken us a huge amount of work to get to where we're at. And we have wonderful exemplar examples. It's just that they're pockets. And we really want to say it's time to start shifting the gears and start harvesting the best of the best. That out of the resource time that any school has, however much equipment they have, are we going to the highest ground that we can go? Or are we just happy that kids are touching it and teachers are using it?
Right.
So the first thing I would say to principals, who again are that critical gear shifting group to get out of the trailblazers who have given us these models and start to really harvest it for the rest of the school, I would say to leaders, be curious. Now that the equipment is in your building, how is it used? So we're going to look at the next slide to sort of represent either informally or formally helping the leadership, and that would be the principals, the curriculum directors, probably the media specialists, and anyone who's formally or informally responsible for helping technology work well. But to sort of together start to walk your halls and start to code what you see in the halls as, well, when I see that in the classroom, first of all, is it even being used? Because I will tell you again, out of my many walkthroughs, at any one time, about 70 to 75% of the equipment in the classrooms is not in use. There are reasons for that, and they usually tell me I walk through the 1 nanosecond that it was all off, because every other part of the day they were using it. So we walk through 2 or 3 times to sort of dispel that myth. But in fact, teachers have so much work to do that the technology often becomes what I call tween time. So that means between whatever time they have to get one objective done and the other. Now, that is not true of every classroom or every teacher, but we're looking at the pattern of use in the building. So we do a walkthrough with our principals, and we say, look at the whiteboards. How are they being used? Look at the docu-cameras. What are the projects kids are doing and not doing? And what's really interesting is that the technologies that fit the adapting pedagogy, that means students being information consumers, are the ones that are most enthusiastically and sort of virally adopted. I mean, PowerPoint fit. There you go. PowerPoint fits a pedagogy, and not that it can't be bent towards something else, but it fits our understanding of kids reporting out what they know and able to do. I have a school district that spent millions of dollars on whiteboards, and we did a walkthrough in every building. And they were really disappointed. They were 3 years in. They had directed their teachers that if the kids were holding the stylus, then they were doing the highest performance with those whiteboards. And by the way, it's good that the kids have the stylus, but because kids are participating does not mean that they're doing rigorous work at that whiteboard. So we saw a lot of whiteboards not in use or shining up assignments and walking through there. So I'm going to come to the point of how we kind of get in that snag and shift gears. But I saw the other day a visual of Bloom's taxonomy and the tools, and a wiki was placed at the top as the highest Bloom's vocabulary for create. And I thought it was really interesting because if I were to see a wiki and it was about Mark Twain and the kids were repackaging existing information, unless there was something else driving that, I'm not seeing anything but an adapting use. And that's not to say wikis can't create more happening, but the goal of packaging the information inside of a wiki and stopping there creates that.
Right, it's that whole regurgitation piece again. You know, if they're just, hunting for it and spitting it back out at us, that's not what we're looking for. Yeah.
Well, and I think we get enthusiastic that a teacher's willing to do a wiki and has thought about it, and I'm not saying that that's a negative thing, but at the end of the walkthrough, we want to see what's the pattern of use. What you're seeing on the screen right now is pretty much a common pattern out of all of my walkthroughs. And the reason it's a common pattern is because the technology has been left optional. We've been very happy if teachers were even willing to have it in their rooms and use it. And yet at the end of the day, we haven't been having these other conversations about if it were there and we were using it, what is it we're really expecting? So I'll just leave this as a conversation that says we want our principals to start walking through, to start noticing, and to start taking the glitter out of their eyes and look past the stuff. Look at the kids and look at the work.
You know, I'm so glad you brought the piece up about the interactive whiteboards because, I mean, in my 15 years of teaching and supporting technology with teachers in a few different schools, I've never seen a piece of hardware adopted so readily by teachers from every layer of technology comfortability. And I always wondered about that. And listening to you last week, we were out in Denver together, and I did hear your presentation. And listening to you talk about that, you mentioned, well, here's the thing. This is a piece of technology, a piece of hardware that gives everybody the impression that we're moving forward, we're advancing and getting into more sophisticated uses of technology. But really, it's just a tool if it's not used with all the sophistication that it's capable of. It's just doing the same old pedagogical method with a fancier, shinier pencil. Not
so
as a glorified
let me just say one more
yeah.
thing about leaders. I absolutely have seen transforming practices with whiteboards. But when the training is about learning the tool, and of course there's examples, and then they go back and their goal is to use the tool rather than to be modeling and increasing their mastery of an instructional practice, then as long as the teachers are using it, they've actually met their principal's agenda. The last Net Day survey that I looked at had 77% of their teachers reporting no pressure from their principals to use the internet. And I would say that's fairly common in my experience throughout the assessments, because teachers are left to decide or not decide what they will or won't do with the technology. So we really have a huge gap to fill, and again the leader stands right there in the gap with the ability to take the tools we have and make more happen, or to let it just sort of be whatever it goes to. And Maggie, what you're saying here is that teachers revert back to what's familiar and what's known and what's comfortable. This is not about pointing fingers at teachers. It's about saying, what's the expectation? And if I'm using it, haven't I met the expectation of the people who installed the equipment? So what I will tell you in that walkthrough, out of 40 buildings, we probably only saw 2% transforming uses of the whiteboards. And people were a little down because that was not their intention, to spend the money and not have results. So
and I guess I can speak from Ramapo, my experience there. I did see the teachers jump on board with these things, and I guess now that they're all comfortable with the actual nuts and bolts of the tool, now is when we can start bringing it up a notch, kicking it up a level too. Because in all fairness, you have to realize too that teachers. I love teachers. I love their spirit. I love their dedication. I love their vision. But let's face it, they're under that crunch to meet those state standards.